Ken Burns, in a recent 60 Minutes interview, while talking about his role as a teller of stories, shared this insight. I quote, "This is what stories do. They liberate us from the tyrannies of our limitations, our past, our foibles. And so this is what we as human beings do to negotiate this all too short passage that we call life." Unquote. We tell stories. We've been telling them from the dawn of our existence. We will continue to tell them into the future in all sorts of new media. I am sure that this past year, 2020, will have its own volume of stories. The COVID saga. Last week, I talked briefly about the importance of the story, the sacred story that we call Holy Scriptures in lives of faith. It shapes us, it strengthens us, it gives us hope and comfort. I talked also about the living and dynamic Word that was enfleshed in Jesus' life, death, and resurrection, and continues to unfold within the life of the church these days. But one of the things that is often lost is that we, both individually and as communities of faith, are given the primary responsibility, perhaps even the solitary responsibility, of going to tell our story. In John's Gospel, there was a haunting refrain, "Come and see, go and tell." In fact, the final words to Peter in that Gospel are to go feed my sheep. In the Gospel of Matthew, as Jesus gathers his disciples for final instructions, he sends them out into all the world to tell. And in Luke's commentary on the Ascension, Jesus instructs his disciples, "You are my witnesses." We are given a role of storyteller to tell the sacred stories. And those stories are not just contained in the pages of Scripture. They are embedded in our lives. We are, by God's grace, a sacred story. One of the most difficult things I have to do when I'm out doing the work of evangelist is to convince people that they have a story to tell. And even when it seems to be just a plain old story, it oftentimes turns out to be a true story of faith and a witness to God's grace and love in the world, even when we don't recognize it. I've shared with many of you over the past year how in June of last year, my mother, my biological mother, and I were reunited after 62 years. We have had a lot of opportunities over the course of that year and a half to share that story, both individually and collectively, in all manner of situations and locations. And what has struck both of us when we tell that story are people's reactions. It is a feel-good story, but the reaction is so much more than that. Time and time again, comments are made about having faith restored through that story, of recognizing the power of God, the power of prayer, the power of perseverance, and how God's timing is incredible. A simple story that is our story, is a sacred story in the hands of God. And so we are sent to tell our stories again and again, that others may hear and see and experience the very presence of God as we all try to negotiate this all too short a passage that we call life. Oh, for 1,000 tongues to sing my great Redeemer's praise, the glories of our God and King, the triumphs of his grace. My gracious Master and my God, assist me to proclaim, to spread through all the earth abroad the honors of your name. To God all glory, praise and love be now and ever give, by saints below and saints above, the church in earth and heaven.